Okay, just picture this for a second. You're in Dubai, right? One of the biggest, busiest travel crossroads on the entire planet. And then, overnight, the sky just goes silent. The airport's locked down, your flight is gone, and you are well and truly stuck. This isn't some movie plot. This is exactly what went down in March 2026. So let's get into it, how a regional conflict managed to spark total global travel chaos and send ticket prices absolutely through the roof. I mean, just look at that number. It is staggering. In just the first few days of the conflict, more than 21,000 flights were canceled. And we're not just talking local flights here. This was a global shockwave. It tore through the entire international aviation network, which, as you know, relies so heavily on those Middle Eastern hubs to connect the East and the West. And behind that massive number are people, hundreds of thousands of them. You've got tourists, business travelers, families, people just trying to get home, all of them suddenly grounded. No information, no clear way out. The human side of this disruption was just enormous. So how in the world did we get here? How does one of the busiest airspaces on the planet just stop? Well, the answer is a swift and total lockdown. Let's take a look at the timeline of how this all unfolded. You know, the scary part is how unbelievably fast it all happened. On February 28th, the conflict flares up. Just a day or two later, bam, retaliatory strikes hit major airports in the UAE. We're talking Dubai, Abu Dhabi. The response had to be immediate, a complete and total shutdown. And it wasn't a quick fix either. It took nearly a full week before they could even begin a limited, very cautious reopening. And this is where you really see the domino effect kick in. This wasn't just a couple of airports. No. We saw massive airspace closures all across the region. The giants, Emirates and Etihad, they had to ground their entire fleets. International airlines either just canceled everything or were forced into these crazy long, super expensive detours. And then, the final nail in the coffin, governments started issuing do not travel warnings. Which of course brings us to the real question for anyone caught in the middle of this mess. When the supply of flights basically drops to zero overnight, what on earth happens when you desperately need to buy a ticket to get out? And this is where that logistical nightmare really turns into a financial one. The price shock was instant, and it was severe. It basically became a battle of your wallet against the entire world, all for one of the few seats on a plane. This chart really tells the whole story, doesn't it? A pretty standard one-way flight, let's say from Asia to Europe, one that often connects through the Gulf, went from about $860 to over $2,200. That is almost a 3 times increase. It's just the simple, brutal economics of a crisis laid bare. And here's exactly why those prices exploded. On a normal day, you've got about 3,000 flights crisscrossing the Middle East. During the crisis, that number plummeted to just 800. So you have this massive, desperate demand from people trying to leave, while the supply of flights had practically vanished. And even when things did start moving again, the recovery was painfully slow. A mega hub like Dubai International, which is usually a nonstop hive of activity, was operating at only a quarter of its normal capacity. A slow trickle of flights just isn't enough when you got a massive backlog of stranded passengers. This piece of official advice really paints a picture of the chaos on the ground, doesn't it? The situation got so bad that airports literally had to turn people away if they didn't have a confirmed ticket. You couldn't just show up and hope for the best. The terminals were completely overwhelmed. So let's say you were one of the lucky few who could actually find a flight. Where could you even go? The options were few and far between and very expensive. These weren't travel plans anymore, they were escape routes. And you can see right here that your destination made all the difference. Honestly, the most realistic options were short regional flights. You might get a one-way ticket to Dammam in Saudi Arabia for as low as $32. Getting to Europe? Well, maybe to Geneva on a low-cost airline for around $118, but finding one of those seats was like winning the lottery. But if your goal was to get to a major long-haul destination, London, New York, the prices jumped again big time. A round trip to London was pushing over $400. And getting all the way to Los Angeles, that'd set you back more than $800. And again, that's if you could even find a seat in the first place. And to make things even more complicated, you have to remember that a lot of the first planes that did take off, well, they weren't even available to the public. They were what we call repatriation flights, special charters organized by governments to go in and rescue their own citizens. So that limited the already tiny number of commercial seats even further. So what's the big takeaway from all this? I think it shows that our global travel network is way more fragile than we like to think. A conflict in one spot can have immediate worldwide effects. And when supply just disappears, prices don't just rise, they multiply. In a crisis like this, your ability to get out depends entirely on where you're trying to go, and things like low-cost carriers and flexible dates become absolute lifelines. It really leaves us with a pretty sobering question. We live in this world that feels so incredibly connected by air travel, but this whole event shows just how fast those connections can be cut. When the skies suddenly close, how secure are any of our routes home, really?